The sun hadn't even fully risen when the sharp whistle pierced the air. Recruits scrambled to form lines outside the barracks, boots hitting the pavement in chaotic rhythm. Sergeant Pike, known for running inspections with a sadistic flair, paced like a predator down the concrete line, clipboard in hand, sunglasses hiding any shred of mercy. Private Rachel Dawson stood, perfectly straight, spine locked, hands behind her back. Her expression was calm, but her stomach twisted. She hadn't slept well. Not from fear, but because she'd spent most of the night polishing everything she owned. Still, something had gone wrong. Dawson. Sergeant Pike's voice sliced the air. She stepped forward crisply. Sir. He looked her over with a slow, exaggerated sneer, then crouched and tapped her boots with his pen. He's supposed to be clean, Private? A few snickers escaped from down the line. She didn't flinch. Sir, I polished them last night. Well, either you're blind or I am, Pike growled, standing again. Because I'm seeing scuffed leather and grit. In the saws. Laughter broke out open now. Someone even clapped MOCKINGOY. Rachel remained rigid. She wouldn't defend herself. She knew the rules. Don't talk back, don't explain. Just take the hit. Pike turned to the locker behind her and flung the door open. It squeaked slightly, barely, but enough. He smirked. Not flush, that's a demerit. And what's this? Dust on the shelf? He swiped a finger along the edge and held it up. You planning on joining the infantry or running a motel? More laughter. This time louder. Rachel stared ahead. Her jaw clenched. Pike stepped back and barked, Fail. Report for remedial inspection at 0500 tomorrow. Maybe try acting like you care. She nodded once. Sir? As he moved on, the tension bled into amusement. Recruits relaxed. Some shook their heads. One voice muttered, Useless. Inside, Rachel burned. Not from shame, but from restraint. She had always been careful, always precise. She knew how this looked, but she couldn't explain. She wouldn't. That was the deal. Back in the barracks, the jokes began immediately. Hey, Dawson, a recruit called, holding out a sponge. Here, maybe this'll help with your dust problem. Someone else had taken one of the communal toothbrushes and taped it to her locker with a note. Use me, scrub. A third left a bar of soap on her pillow. She said nothing. She removed the items without a word and sat on her bunk and started relacing her boots slowly, meticulously, without emotion. A group of 4 nearby recruits chuckled from across the room. Bet she barely passed basic, one said. Probably got in through one of those tech programs. You know, push papers, not wait. Or she's just slow, another added. Didn't even try to talk back, like a robot. But not everyone laughed. Private Malik Jones watched from his corner bunk, brow furrowed. Something about Rachel didn't add up. Her movements were too practiced, her posture too perfect. And she hadn't flinched once, not during the inspection, not during the mocking. That wasn't weakness. That was discipline. But why? Malik remembered how she arrived. No family at drop-off. No excited chatter about where she came from. Just a duffel, silence, and eyes that scanned everything. He hadn't spoken to her yet. No one really had. She didn't join the cafeteria gossip. She trained early. She never lingered during downtime. But she wasn't lazy. If anything, she outperformed half the unit just quietly. Still, she was a mystery. And in a place like this, silence made people uncomfortable. That night, Rachel didn't sleep much again. She didn't need to. She'd gone through far worse on far less. After lights out, she lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of the inspection. The locker had squeaked. That was on her. But she hadn't planned for the scuff. She remembered. walking in from the field the previous evening, catching gravel along the way. She should have double-checked. But this wasn't about a failed inspection. She'd known from the beginning they'd target her. Quiet recruits always did. Women who didn't play the social game became outcasts fast. Add to that her record being sealed due to clearance, and it was a recipe for suspicion. She had no regrets. This was her choice. To start again. No rank, no privilege, no shadows from her past. Just earn it all. From the bottom. At 0430, she was up and outside before anyone else, scrubbing her boots so hard the brush wore down. She cleaned her locker edge with alcohol wipes, then tightened every hinge. By the time others began to stir, she was already running sprints in the lot, sweat pouring, breath sharp. Malik saw her from the window. Alone again, but something was shifting. The girl they laughed at wasn't broken. She was sharpening. Asterisk. Word of Rachel's failed inspection spread across the barracks like wildfire. By mid-morning, she was no longer just a recruit who slipped up. She was the example of what not to be. Her name echoed in every sarcastic joke, whispered warning, an exaggerated tale told between bunks. She'd become legend, and not the good kind. She didn't even try to defend herself. Someone muttered in the lunch line, probably too scared to talk back. Another replied. Someone at the end of the table slapped his tray down. Nah, she's one of those weird ones. Probably joined to escape some boring desk job. Across the room, Rachel sat alone. She ate silently, chewing methodically, eyes on her tray. Her face gave away nothing. Not irritation, not embarrassment. She finished eating, placed her utensils with careful symmetry, and left the hall. Behind her, someone fake saluted. All hail Private Perfect. The group roared with laughter, but not everyone joined in. Malik Jones, seated in the corner with a quiet plate of chili, watched it all unfold with a growing sense of discomfort. He didn't know Rachel, but something wasn't right. She wasn't reacting the way most people did when humiliated. No burst of temper, no tears, no visible anger. She didn't even seem annoyed. That kind of composure wasn't common in recruits, not unless they'd already been through hell. The next few days only deepened the divide. Someone replaced the label on Rachel's locker with D. List Dawson. Another slipped a fake letter of dismissal into her duffel, complete with the words unfit for duty scrawled in red. Someone else left a printed flyer in the latrine. Inspection tips from the best. How to fail in 5 easy steps by Rachel Dawson. Rachel found each item, read them without expression, and discarded them. Not once did she ask who did it. Not once did she retaliate. Instead, she trained. She ran laps before dawn, did push-ups during breaks, and stayed behind after drills to repeat every movement until it was flawless. She rechecked her locker twice daily. Her boots gleamed so brightly. They nearly reflected faces. She said little, but she moved like someone with purpose. One night, Malik found himself outside the barracks with a bottle of water, cooling down after a long endurance run. He caught sight of Rachel alone in the shadow of the maintenance shed, practicing sidearm draw techniques with a replica pistol. She repeated the same motion 20, 30, 40 times, each movement precise. Clean, smooth. Then she reholstered, closed her eyes, and repeated it again, muscle memory burning itself into her limbs. Malik walked over, hesitated, then said quietly, "You know, most people would have cracked by now." Rachel didn't stop. She drew the weapon again, held it steady, then spoke for the first time Malik had heard all week. "Most people haven't been where I've been." He raised an eyebrow. "You served before?" "No." She holstered the replica. "I survived." "Before?" Malik didn't press. He just nodded. "Respect," he said softly. Rachel gave him a half smile. "You're the first." The next day, the group had a field exercise in movement coordination. They were split into squads. Rachel, to no one's surprise, was buried in one of the less organized groups. Recruits barely listened to her when she spoke. They fumbled. They missed signals. One recruit tripped and blamed Rachel loudly. Maybe if someone wasn't in La La Land, we'd be halfway through this already. Rachel looked at him once and redirected the group with a brief command. It worked. The movement corrected. They completed the drill. But afterward, the squad still mumbled complaints behind her back. She just got lucky. Malik, now watching, more closely than ever, saw through it. She wasn't lucky. She was trained, too trained. Her instructions were calm, concise like someone who'd led before. But why was she here, starting over? Later that evening, Rachel stood in the shower room alone, scrubbing mud off her arms from the field. The water ran red from scrapes she hadn't even acknowledged. A few other recruits passed through, watching her warily, confused by the stoic energy that never cracked. Two of the worst offenders from earlier walked past, whispering as they went. Rachel said nothing, but one paused just long enough to mutter, "You keep acting like you're better than the rest of us. That's why no one wants you here." Rachel rinsed the soap from her hands, turned off the faucet, and replied without looking, "I don't need anyone to want me here. I'm here to finish what I started." She wrapped herself in a towel and walked away. That night, Malik sat on his bunk, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. He'd seen all kinds of recruits, loud ones, angry ones, weak ones, scared ones. But Rachel didn't fit any category. Her silence wasn't passivity. It was earned. He'd watched her track patterns during obstacle courses faster than anyone else. She predicted instructors' tricks before they sprang. He'd seen her reassemble a disassembled rifle in half the time most others could. She was good. Too good. And yet no one knew who she really was. And that was exactly how she wanted it. The next morning, word came down that a high-ranking officer, Colonel Abrams, was doing a surprise visit to review the unit. Rachel didn't flinch when she heard the name, but something in her eyes sharpened, barely visible. And for the first time since she arrived at base, she paused during her routine. Just for a moment. Then she tied her boots tighter, adjusted her shirt, and resumed. Malik noticed, and he began to wonder who exactly was Private Rachel Dawson. By noon, the entire base buzzed with tension. "Colonel Abrams is on site," the sergeant announced, clipboard in hand and spine straighter than usual. "He'll be observing this afternoon's drill formations and reviewing performance records." Everyone stood taller. Colonel Jacob Abrams wasn't just another high-ranking officer. He was a decorated war veteran, known for weeding out inefficiency with a glare and a few sharp words. He had a reputation for knowing the difference between soldiers who talked and those who served, and not being kind to either if they didn't measure up. "Best behavior," Sergeant Pike warned. "One mistake, and you'll regret it." Rachel Dawson said nothing, as always. But Malik Jones noticed her shoulders stiffen, not from fear, but readiness. Like she was bracing for something she'd been expecting for weeks. The units gathered on the field, in tight formation. Colonel Abrams arrived without ceremony, stepping out of a black SUV, accompanied by 2 aides. His uniform was immaculate, ribbons and medals neat but unboastful. His sharp eyes scanned the field, never lingering in one place too long. Sergeant Pike met him halfway, snapping a crisp salute. "Welcome, sir. Recruits assembled." The colonel returned the salute without expression. "Carry on." He walked the line, boots crunching softly on gravel. His gaze swept across each face, each uniform, each stance. Then, without warning, he stopped. "Name?" he asked. "Private Rachel Dawson, sir." Malik's head turned sharply. Of all the faces, the colonel had paused at hers. Abrams stared at her for a long second. Something shifted behind his eyes. Barely. A flicker of recognition? No one else seemed to notice. "Private Dawson," he said slowly. "Step out of formation." Rachel. Obeyed, wordless. The colonel turned to Sergeant Pike. "I'd like to review this recruit's personnel file." Pike blinked. "Sir? You heard me. Dawson's file. Now." "Right away, sir." Pike turned sharply and moved with haste more rattled than he'd ever looked before. Murmurs stirred the formation. The same recruits who had mocked Rachel just days before now shifted uncomfortably in their boots. Why had she caught the colonel's eye? Malik's thoughts ran faster than his pulse. Why would Abrams, a man known for precision, for detail, for excellence, pause at Rachel? There were dozens of recruits, smarter ones, louder ones, flashier ones. But he'd picked the quiet girl with the scuffed boots, and no, friends. Something was happening. Minutes passed. The colonel said nothing while waiting for the file. Rachel stood still, chin up, posture perfect. Not a hint of nervousness. Not even curiosity. Like she'd expected this moment all along. Finally, Sergeant Pike returned, holding a manila folder. "Her file, sir," he said, offering it with both hands. Abrams took it, opened it, and began to read page by page, flipping slowly, methodically. Field was silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. His brows tightened. He read more. A full minute passed. Then when he finally closed the folder. His face was unreadable, but clearly altered. He turned to Pike. "Did you read this before assigning her?" Pike hesitated. "I skimmed the basics, sir." No unusual notes stood out. "No? Unusual notes?" Abrams said flatly. He held up the folder and tapped the front. "This recruit has 6 years of high-level cyber intelligence work, including classified operations connected to global anti-terrorism efforts. She was embedded with Joint Task Force Omega. 3 commendations, 2 operation ribbons, and a presidential. Citation redacted, of course." A collective gasp rippled through the line. Even Malik's jaw slackened. Abrams wasn't finished. "She voluntarily requested reassignment to infantry. Do you know what that means?" Pike opened his mouth. Closed. It means," the colonel continued, "she chose to come here. She chose this." Rachel remained silent. "Why wasn't this flagged?" Pike asked weakly. "It was," Abrams said coldly. "But her file was locked clearance level 3. Standard protocol for operatives returning from covert stations. She requested no special treatment, no exemption from standard training. She could have walked into a Pentagon-level reassignment. Instead, she's here, getting mocked by recruits half her caliber." Abrams turned back to Rachel. "Why?" he asked. Rachel looked him in the eye. "I wanted to prove I could earn it all over again, sir, without shortcuts." A heavy silence followed. Then the colonel turned to the formation. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice rising. "You don't know who stands beside you. You think a clean boot makes a good soldier? You think you can measure someone's worth by how loud they are in the mess hall?" His glare swept across the recruits. "Every single one of you owes Private Dawson an apology." Pike flinched. "And as of now," Abrams added, "she leads your next coordination drill." "That's not a recommendation. That's an order." Rachel returned to formation, eyes forward, expression unchanged. But around her, nothing was the same. Every recruit stood a little stiffer. No one dared whisper now, even the ones who'd laughed. Loudest were pale with embarrassment. Malik couldn't stop staring. All this time, she'd been a ghost from the elite, hiding in plain sight. Not just competent exceptional, a real operator. And no one had seen it, except maybe Abrams, and maybe now. Malik. After the colonel departed, the unit was dismissed back to barracks. Rachel walked ahead of the others, alone again, but no longer unnoticed. Malik jogged up beside her, breath short. "You knew he'd find you," he said. She glanced over. "I hoped he wouldn't," she said quietly. "But you were ready. I always." She didn't smile. She didn't need to, because from that moment on, no one would ever laugh at her again. The air in the barracks was different, that evening, charged with tension, but silent. No laughter echoed off the walls. No jokes whispered from bunk to bunk. The mockery that once followed Rachel like a shadow had vanished. Now every glance was laced with confusion, regret, or awe. The story of Colonel Abrams' inspection had already spread across the base like wildfire. Everyone knew now. The girl they mocked, the one they thought was weak, had a file thicker than any of theirs. And it was classified for a reason. Malik sat at the edge of his bunk, cleaning his rifle, but barely looking at it. He kept glancing across the room at Rachel, who sat cross-legged on her bed, quietly writing in a small notebook. She wasn't glowing with pride. She wasn't reveling in her sudden recognition. She was still. Just Rachel. Calm, focused, silent. That made her even more mysterious. One of the guys who had joked about the toothbrush prank earlier approached her hesitantly. "Hey, Dawson." She looked up. He rubbed the back of his neck. "About earlier. You know, before the colonel," Rachel raised a brow. "You want to apologize?" He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I do." She closed her notebook. "Good. Now don't let it happen to the next person either." He blinked, taken aback. "Right," he said quietly, and walked away. Sergeant Pike didn't say a word the entire day after Abrams left. He walked with his jaw tight and eyes low. No barked orders. No sarcastic remarks. Every time he passed Rachel, he stiffened slightly, like unsure of where he stood now. Because the truth was, he hadn't just misjudged a recruit, he'd embarrassed himself in front of a colonel. And worse, he'd disrespected a soldier who had earned more than he ever would. During the afternoon drill prep, Pike called the unit into formation. "Private Dawson," he said stiffly, "you're in charge of the field simulation." There was a short pause. "Carry on." He stepped aside, jaw twitching. Rachel didn't hesitate. She took one step forward and turned to face the group. "We're running a tight two-phase sweep," she said, voice steady. "Divide into 4-person fire teams. Each squad will move point to point undercover, rotate leads, and maintain radio silence unless under simulated fire." "Got it?" The group nodded, some still unsure if they should look her in the eyes. "Malik," she said, turning to him. "You take Team 2. He snapped into motion. "Yes, Mom." The drills began. What followed was the cleanest field exercise the unit had ever run. Commands were clear. Movement was sharp. Mistakes were corrected on the fly, not with shouting, but with Rachel's quiet confidence. She didn't just bark orders. She watched how each person moved, adjusted strategies mid-drill, and made everyone feel like they were part of something smarter. Better. By the end of the second run, even the most skeptical recruits were following her every word. Malik caught glimpses of her skill in real time, how she instinctively scanned high ground for imaginary snipers, how she spotted a recruit about to slip on loose gravel before it happened, how she mapped the terrain without looking down once. This wasn't training for her. It was remembering. That night, after lights out, Malik couldn't sleep. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it really meant to be the kind of soldier Rachel was. What she'd seen, what she'd done, and why someone like her would choose to come back to square one all over again. Eventually, he got up, padded quietly over to her bunk, and knocked lightly on the metal frame. She was already awake. Sitting up in the dim moonlight, still in her undershirt, flipping through that same notebook. He sat beside the bed, keeping his voice low. "Why'd you come here, Rachel?" She didn't look up. "Same reason you did. To prove something?" "To myself. To see if I could do it without shortcuts. No badges. No reputation." He studied her. "You did a lot before this, didn't you?" She gave a small nod. "More than most will ever know." "You ever get scared out there?" A faint smile crossed her lips. "Only once." "When?" "When I realized they'd send someone else if I failed." They sat in silence for a long time. A few days later, Colonel Abrams returned unannounced. This time, no ceremony, no clipboard, just purpose. He walked directly into the barracks with 2 aides and asked for Rachel. She met him in the hallway, straight posture, eyes calm. He handed her a sealed envelope. "This is your permanent clearance reinstatement." She looked at it but didn't open it. "I'm not leaving yet," she said quietly. He nodded, unsurprised. "Didn't think you would." The colonel paused, then added, "I know people underestimated you. I did once too." Rachel shook her head. "I needed that." He gave a rare smile. "Well, you earned more than you're claiming. That takes guts." With that, he turned and walked away. Back in the barracks, Malik asked her what it was. She held up the envelope, unopened. "Orders, probably a fast track. Command slot. Tech division. Or a DC desk. You gotta take it." Rachel stared at the envelope for a long moment, then slid it under her mattress. Not yet. That night, for the first time, she laughed. It was soft, quiet but real. Malik looked over. "What's funny?" She shook her head. "Just thinking they laughed when I failed inspection." He chuckled. "Yeah, and now they act like you invented the army." "Let them," she said. "I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to be ready." And with that, she lay down, folded her arms under her head, and closed her eyes, resting at last. Before Rachel Dawson ever wore the Army's basic training uniform, she had worn a suit, far more dangerous one, stitched in silence, bound by secrecy, and built inside the shadow world of digital war. 3 years ago, she sat in a classified Operations Center 5 stories below Arlington. The room was dark, lit only by monitors and soft blue LED strips. No windows. Just data. Heat maps. Threat grids. Leave intercepts. She was part of Omega Track, a highly classified cyber intelligence unit built for one job: stop catastrophic attacks before they ever left the planning stage. She never carried a rifle. She never crossed borders, but her keystrokes saved lives. She was the lead analyst on Operation Sable Drift, a mission that intercepted communications between an international terrorist cell and a rogue weapons broker. Her work led to the capture of 6 operatives and the prevention of a planned chemical strike on a U.S. military base in Jordan. No medals. No press. Only a sealed commendation, tucked in a file only Abrams and a few select others could access. She received her thanks in a silent, windowless room. And then, just like that, she vanished from that world. It wasn't enemy threats that ended her covert service. It was what happened afterward. A data breach exposed her name. A rival agency leaked files in an internal power struggle. Though partially redacted, someone overseas had pieced enough together to paint a target on her back. Her apartment was surveilled. Her routine had to be erased. The moment she found a suspicious device under her car in a DC parking lot, the Pentagon ordered her to disappear. Protective reassignment, they called it. But Rachel didn't want to vanish into a quiet analyst job, or sit behind a desk with a different name and a blank future. She'd had enough of shadows. She wanted something real, something physical. She chose infantry. When she submitted her transfer request, the officers who reviewed it tried to talk her out of it. You've already done more than most soldiers will ever do. But she didn't want decorations. She wanted sweat, gravel, and hard-earned stripes. No favors, she told them. I start where everyone else starts. Her record was sealed. Her past buried, and she began again, just another recruit in a sea of faces. But it wasn't just about a fresh start. Rachel needed to feel small again, to rebuild herself with weight on her back, blisters on her heels, and the raw truth of who she was beneath the intel briefs and encrypted emails. So, she let them mock her, let them tape toothbrushes to her locker, let them think she was just another quiet girl who couldn't cut it. They had no idea. And for a while, she preferred it that way. Until Colonel Abrams opened her file. Now, the secret was out, at least partially. She hadn't spoken about Operation Sable Drift, or about the 8 straight months she spent tracking threats without sleep, longer than 3 hours at a time. Or about the colleague who died when their cover was blown halfway through a joint. Agency Mission 1, Rachel had helped plan. There were parts she would never talk about, parts she carried alone. After the colonel's visit, Rachel's days changed, but she didn't. Others stared when she walked into the mess hall now, nudging each other, whispering. A few asked her questions, tried to befriend her. She answered politely, but didn't linger. One recruit, a wiry kid from Arizona, asked, "Is it true you helped stop a terrorist plot?" She tilted her head. "Is it true you ate 3 protein bars in one sitting yesterday?" The kid flushed. Yeah. Then I guess we're both legends." She walked off, leaving him stunned and smiling. Malik watched from across the chaw room and shook his head. Rachel wasn't just good. She was sharp, measured, always in control. But even he didn't know how deep the story went. One night, he finally asked. They were walking the perimeter path in silence, taking a break between drills. "You ever miss it?" Rachel didn't have to ask what he meant. The intel work? "Yeah," she shrugged. "I miss the impact. I don't miss the silence, or the loneliness, or being a ghost." Malik looked at her. "You're still kind of a ghost," Rachel smirked. "Maybe, but this time I get to leave footprints." She kicked at the gravel beneath her boots. "Every blister, every mile, it reminds me I'm still human. That I'm not just a name on a closed file somewhere." Malik nodded slowly. "You're not like the rest of us." "I don't want to be," she said. "I want to be better." Later, Rachel returned to her bunk, pulled out the envelope the colonel had given her, and opened it for the first time. Inside were reassignment options. Cyber Command, Joint Special Tasking Force, Pentagon Analyst. All high clearance, high impact roles, ones she'd already earned. But she folded the paper, slid it back in, and tucked it under her mattress again. Because for now, Rachel Dawson wasn't done proving herself the hard way. She wasn't finished showing the Yaj world and herself that she could lead from the ground up. That even after saving lives behind screens and across oceans, she could still build something with her hands, her sweat and her scars. And for once, she didn't need anyone to know the whole story. She just needed to keep going. The next morning, the mood on base was different, charged with respect and unspoken challenge. Everyone had seen what Rachel Dawson had been through. Now they waited to see what she would do with the authority the colonel had handed her. And she didn't wait long. At 0700, the company was assembled for a tactical simulation. It was a 2-hour drill designed to replicate a hostage extraction scenario in hostile terrain. Usually, Sergeant Pike led the coordination. But not today. Rachel stood in front of the map board, pointer in hand, eyes scanning the terrain markers. "All right," she began, voice firm but level. "This isn't a game. It's not about how fast you can move. It's how smart you move." Everyone was listening. Even Pike. Rachel divided the recruits into 4 teams and assigned roles. She handed the map over to Malik, who would run communication relay. She double-checked weapons loadouts, even adjusted the stance of one recruit gripping their rifle too tight. "Breathe," she told him. "You can't lead when your hands shake." She wasn't arcing. She wasn't cold. But she had presence, and people felt it. The simulation began. Each team had to navigate rough ground under time pressure, moving through mock ambushes, clearing buildings, and making judgment calls without waiting for direct orders. Rachel's strategy emphasized coordination, communication, and mutual accountability. Halfway through, one team hit a delay. A simulated tripwire triggered an explosion. Sound effect. The team panicked, momentarily forgetting protocol. Rachel was on it immediately. Team 3 hold. Adjust formation. Don't scatter. Move to secondary approach. She ordered over radio. Her voice didn't spike. It didn't shake. It just commanded. The team recovered and executed perfectly. Malik, observing from the hilltop with a comms board, shook his head in disbelief. He'd seen lieutenants freeze under pressure. He'd seen seasoned NCOs lose control. But Rachel? She moved like someone who'd led for years. After the drill, Sergeant Pike called the unit into formation. "Not bad," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Could have gone worse." He cleared his throat, and credit where it's due. Dawson ran a tight op. The recruits glanced at each other. This was the closest thing to an apology Pike had ever given. Rachel stood tall, saying nothing. The sergeant added, "You're officially team lead for the next rotation. That includes command briefings, equipment checks, and end-of-day reports." "Yes, Sergeant," she replied. He hesitated, then nodded once before turning away. Back in the barracks, Malik approached her while she was cleaning her boots. "Command's different than just knowing what to do," he said. "You make it look easy." She glanced up. "It's not easy." He smiled. "But you don't flinch." "Because if I do," she said quietly, "someone else might not make it." There was a weight in her voice that pulled Malik up short. He knew it wasn't about training anymore. It was about history. Regret, responsibility. Experience, bought in darker places. As the days rolled on, Rachel's leadership began to shape the unit. She implemented structured training cycles, broke down drills into layers, and paired weaker recruits with stronger ones. When one of them fumbled, she corrected, not with shame, but with direction. "You're not failing," she told one exhausted private. "You're just not finished yet." The recruits started talking less behind her back, and more with each other. Even the class clown, Stevens, the same guy who taped the toothbrush to her locker, started arriving early for drills. "She makes me nervous," he told Malik once, "but in the kind of way that makes me better." A week later, during weapons qualifications, Rachel was asked to demonstrate advanced rifle disassembly under time. The instructor stopped the timer mid-demo. "Where'd you learn that?" Rachel didn't look up. "Spent time with an enhanced operations unit. Learned a few tricks." "Would have guessed you were special forces," he said. "No," she replied. "I just wanted to be good enough to keep them alive." He nodded slowly. "You were." That night, after chow, Malik and Rachel sat under the floodlights by the training field. "You ever think you'll go back?" he asked. "To cyber?" She said, double quotes, "No, to that life. Clearance, secrets, black bags, and locked rooms." Rachel took a long breath, eyes distant. "Sometimes. But I never want to be invisible again. Not to myself." He nodded. "You're not invisible here." "Not anymore," she agreed. There was a long pause. She added, "But I had to earn it the hard way." "You did." "No," she said with a quiet smirk. "I am The next morning, a new group of recruits arrived on base. Among them were fresh faces, some scared, some cocky. They stared at the existing unit, unsure who was who. Then Rachel stepped forward with a roster in hand. "Fall in," she called. The new recruits obeyed instantly. They didn't know her story, but something in her presence told them she wasn't someone to ignore. That day, Sergeant Pike stood off to the side, arms folded, watching the drill lines with narrowed eyes. He leaned over to another NCO. She was a mystery when she got here. He muttered. The other man nodded. "Still is." "Yeah," Pike replied, "but she turned this place around faster than anyone I've seen." He paused. Colonel was right. We had no damn clue who she was. But now they did. Rachel Dawson wasn't just the girl who failed inspection. She was the reason everyone else stopped failing, too. The sun was merciless that day, blazing, white-hot over the range. Dust curled from every bootstep. Recruits squinted behind their eye protection, rifles slung over shoulders, sweat soaking their collars. It was live fire training. And it was Rachel Dawson's first time overseeing a full live drill as unit lead. The pressure was thick. She double-checked every name on the clipboard, ensured ear and eye protection were properly fitted, verified targets had been cleared. "You good?" Malik asked, watching her from the observation platform. Rachel gave a quick nod. "They're ready." But deep down, something gnawed at her. A gut feeling. A flicker of doubt. 15 minutes into the exercise, everything was going smoothly. Each recruit moved down the firing lane in rotation-controlled bursts, breathing in rhythm, rifles snapping against shoulders with precision. Then came Private Blake. He was new. Tall, impatient, with a bad habit of rushing instructions. Rachel had been watching him all week. "Remember," she warned, "this isn't Call of Duty. It's not about speed, it's about control." He nodded. Too fast. Too eager. Rachel gave the go-ahead anyway, trusting the safety officers stationed. Near the line, Blake raised his rifle and began firing, but his stance was off. Too aggressive. He leaned in and stumbled. His finger clenched the trigger by instinct. A burst of rounds sprayed sideways, striking low and wide. The safety alarm blared. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Dust rose. Shouts echoed. Rachel ran. Malik reached Blake first and yanked the rifle from his hands. "What the hell were you thinking?" Blake stammered. I slipped. I didn't mean." Rachel checked the impact line. No one was hit. But 2 sandbag walls had been clipped, one dangerously close to where another recruit had crouched moments before. Pike stormed in seconds later. "You want to get someone killed, Private? You think this is a game?" Rachel stepped forward. "It was an accident." Pike turned on her. "An accident you signed off on." "You cleared him." "I followed protocol," she said calmly. "Protocol doesn't matter when someone goes home in a body bag." The words stung, but Rachel didn't flinch. That night, Pike filed a formal citation against her. Negligent supervision. It read, compromised safety procedures. She was temporarily suspended from leadership duties, pending review. Malik threw his hands up. "This is bull. You saw Blake. He wasn't ready." "But that doesn't mean it's your fault." Rachel stared at the paper, jaw tight. "It happened on my watch. I own it. Even if it costs you everything." She looked up at him. "Respect means nothing if I only hold it when things go right." Malik sat in silence. He respected her more in that moment than ever before. Word spread fast. Some recruits whispered that Rachel's rise had ended. Others assumed Pike had been waiting for her to fail. But not all of them. Private Kelsey, one of the quietest, came to Rachel's bunk and stood awkwardly for a moment. "I just wanted to say thanks," she mumbled. "For what?" "For calling my form out during drills last week. I thought you were being too harsh, but today it saved me." Rachel frowned. You were the one in the crouch lane, weren't you? Kelsey nodded. Yeah. If I'd leaned just 2 inches left? She trailed off, eyes wide. Rachel didn't say anything. She just nodded. 2 days passed. Then the colonel returned. Not in dress uniform this time, but in boots and field gear. Didn't go to Pike. He went straight to Rachel. Walk with me, he said. They strolled past the range perimeter, dust crunching underfoot. I read the report, he said. And I also spoke to the safety officers. They say you warned the recruit, that you followed checklist protocol. I did. He looked over. Then why didn't you fight the citation? Rachel kept her eyes forward. Because I was in charge. And leadership doesn't start when things go well. It starts when you take the hit for someone else's mistake. The colonel smiled, just barely. You know, he said, I've been watching soldiers for 30 years. I've seen some rise by being lucky. Others fall by their own pride. He turned to face her fully. But it's rare to see someone willing to bleed for a unit that doesn't even fully know who she is. Rachel met his gaze. I'm not here for praise, she said. I'm here to lead, the hard way. The colonel nodded. Then you're exactly where you belong. That afternoon, Pike was summoned to the command tent. He came out 30 minutes later. Looking annoyed. By evening, the suspension was lifted. Rachel Dawson was reinstated effective immediately. Back in the barracks, Malik handed her a folded piece of paper. What's this? He grinned. A list. Of what? He raised his eyebrows. Everyone who's now volunteered for extra drills, because you're leading them. She opened the list. 12 names. Some were new recruits. Others were the same ones who used to mock her. They want to be better, Malik said. And they know who to follow. Rachel folded the list and tucked it into her pocket. Not as a trophy, but as a promise. That night, before lights out, Rachel stood by the window and watched the floodlights cut through the darkness over the field. She thought about Blake, about the way fear had gripped his face when the rounds went wild. About how close Kelsey came to being a casualty, but also about the fact that no one died. No one got hurt, because she had prepared them. Even if Pike didn't see it, even if she never got a commendation for it, she didn't need it, because she had earned something else. The quiet trust of those who once laughed at her. And the voice inside her that finally whispered, You're not invisible anymore. The storm rolled in just before dawn. Thunder cracked like rifle fire above the mountains, and wind lashed across the compound in sheets of dust. But no one inside the base was asleep. Not on evaluation day. It was the final drill of their training cycle. One last chance to prove they were more than recruits. One last chance to show they were soldiers. The colonel himself was overseeing the exercise. Rachel stood silently outside the command tent, helmet strapped, vest snug, eyes locked on the distant hills. Her team was ready because she had made them ready. Behind her, Sergeant Pike approached. You've got 5 hours, full terrain test. Your route runs uphill through 3 hostile zones, storm conditions, live coordination. The colonel wants realism. Rachel gave a slow nod. I've mapped their loadouts and adjusted for the incline. They'll rotate perimeter coverage every quarter mile. Pike hesitated. You don't need to prove anything. You could have skipped this. You're already cleared. Rachel glanced at him. They're not, and I'm not leaving them behind. He grunted and gave a half smile. Guess I was wrong about you, Dawson. She turned, surprised. I thought you were quiet because you didn't care, he said. Turns out it's just because you were watching everything. She offered a hand. He shook it roughly, like a challenge. And with that, the final test began. They moved through ankle-deep mud, eyes sharp, hearts pounding. Rachel took point, compass in hand, calling low commands through the radio. Team 2, shift northwest. Hostile drone simulated at Ridge 10. Roger, came the reply. She crouched behind a broken boulder, scanning terrain with binoculars. Her breath was steady, calculated. Just like before, only now, she wasn't alone in the shadows. She was leading others through them. Halfway through the route, Malik reported a simulated injury, a twisted ankle on Private Hayes. Dead weight. Pike muttered over radio. Negative, Rachel replied. No one gets left behind. She rerouted her team, assigned new coverage zones, and directed a tactical evacuation under pressure. They lost time, but no one got killed. By hour 4, they reached the final checkpoint, a steep rock wall lined with loose gravel and exposed roots. The wind howled harder. Most instructors expected them to fail here. Too dangerous. Too steep. But Rachel saw something different. Split the team, she ordered. Half scale East Ridge with anchors. Half provide cover below. We're building a human haul line. Is that even allowed? Stevens asked. It's not in the handbook, she said. But neither is survival when everything goes wrong. They followed her without hesitation. The climb took 40 minutes. Rain hit halfway up, turning rock to slime. Rachel was the last to climb. And as she reached the summit, fingers raw and arms shaking, she looked back and saw what mattered most. Her entire team. Safe. Together. Stronger than they'd ever been. She helped the final recruit over the edge and whispered, "You're soldiers now." Back at base, the colonel stood beside Pike and watched the team emerge from the trees. Soaked, bruised, exhausted. But not broken. The colonel looked at his stopwatch. Under time, he muttered, and they didn't drop a single man. Pike folded his arms, lips twitching. I've seen teams cheat, scream, fall apart, but she held them together the entire way. She's not just a soldier, the colonel said. She's the reason the rest became one. That evening, the team gathered for their final briefing in the barracks. No inspections. No tests. Just one last formation before graduation. Rachel stood in front of them, clipboard in hand. Her voice quiet but steady. When I arrived, you didn't. Trust me, she said. Some of you laughed. Some of you doubted. Some of you tried to break me. No one spoke. And maybe I would have broken, she added. But I didn't come here to impress you. I came here to protect you. Because the world outside this fence doesn't care how hard your training was. It only cares if you're ready. She stepped back. You are. The room stayed silent, then erupted in applause. Malik clapped first. Kelsey followed. Then all of them, not as a formality, but as a thank you. Later that night, Rachel sat alone by the field. She held a thin folder in her hands. Her file, the one the colonel had opened weeks ago. Inside were classified papers, commendations, operation records, things few people had seen. She pulled one out, an old photo of her, and 3 others from her former unit. They were all gone now. Lost during a mission that went sideways. A mission she had survived. Barely. She hadn't opened this folder since the day she left that life behind. She stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly she closed it, folded it, and tucked it into her duffel for good. The next morning, graduation began under a rising sun. Flags flapped. Boots stamped in unison. Names were called one by one. Private First Class, Stevens. Private First Class, Kelsey. Each recruit stepped forward, saluted, and received their insignia. When Rachel's name was called, the base fell unusually quiet. Corporal Rachel Dawson, the colonel announced, awarded the Command Excellence Pin and Unit Leadership Certification. A rare honor. Rachel stepped forward. Saluted. Took the pin from his hand. And as she turned to face her team, something remarkable happened. Every single soldier in the unit snapped to attention, and saluted her back. In perfect sync. No orders needed. As she walked off the stage, Malik caught up to her, grinning. You know, he said, you really messed with a lot of people's heads. She smirked. Good. Still think you're invisible? Rachel paused, glancing back once at the flag, at the field, at the recruits she'd trained. No, she said quietly. Now I'm unforgettable.